Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. My name of course is Resonant and we're back in the world of Holdfast Nations at War. Now this is a really exciting upcoming game set in the Napoleonic Wars era, and I have done a couple of videos on it in the past. If you want to go and check them out, I definitely recommend it. Now, I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm actually going to put some Mount and Blade Napoleonic Wars footage in the background. Yes, I know it's not Holdfast Nations at War, but we don't have any more footage or gameplay of the game, and I'm sure you guys don't want to see that trailer just repeated over and over again, the one that we've already seen, because we only actually have one video so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some Mount and Blade Napoleonic Wars gameplay for the background, and I'm going to put and overlay the screenshots that I will be mostly talking about. So I hope that is okay for you guys. It is a very related game, as I think you'll see if you haven't seen the game already. But today we're going to be going over some new information that has been released about the game. The developers are very good at keeping the audience and the community very up to date in how the development's going and what features we'll be able to see. So they have a few Q&A posts and they have some blogs on certain topics. Now I'm going to go over the two most recent ones where there's a quick Q&A and there is also a blog that is actually on siege warfare. Now this is probably my most excited point about the game because I just love sieges, the massive scale sieges, and I really want to see as much information about these as possible. So today I'm going to be going over this, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the video. So the blog about the coastal sieges, it gives an example of one of the maps that we will be able to play in the game. This is called Fort Imperial. It is a coastal siege map, and the fort was actually part of a chain of fortifications, but this is just going to be, from what we have seen, one fort that you can attack. Maybe the other chain of forts will be linked, but on different maps. But how will the map play out? So the blog has mostly been split into tips and objectives and things that you can do as the attacker and the defender. So I'm going to be going over this, I'm going to be putting in my 2 cents, and I'm going to be asking you guys a few questions, what you want to see, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your responses, and maybe we can cover them in another video. So of course the main objective for the attacker is to gain control of the fort. They have to break through all the defenses, they have to kill as many enemies as possible, and basically all in all capture this objective. Now, the main features towards these coastal sieges in this game is that they've actually added in a lot of ways you can go about this. Of course, you can actually start on boats out at sea, and you can launch your rowboat from these larger vessels in order to land ashore. Then you can siege the fort. Now, the ways you can get up to this fort is through many different means. One of the really cool ones is actually using artillery on your main ships. You have your cannons and you can fire them at the walls in order to try and create a breach and capture this objective, so your infantry can then push forward. This fort in particular has 2 layers of defences, with long guns, mortars and swivel guns covering most of its surrounding areas. But of course the fort is not impenetrable and it will be able to take it over in a variety of different ways. So it's your decision in how you want to take this fort. Maybe you want to have some sort of strategy that you've discussed with your team, and it will need a certain way of breaching in order to accomplish this strategy. Now, a really cool thing we did actually see in the trailers is the fact that, yes, you may be starting on these big ships out to sea, but you won't actually be able to bring them up very close, which means that rowing boats will be needed in order to get to the shore. You'll have some landing craft, and this does make the attackers very vulnerable, and you're going to have these cool scenes of you rowing up to the shore with cannonballs, musket fire overhead, hitting the water beside you, your friendly ships may be sinking down beside you, and it's going to create a really amazing atmosphere that we can actually sort of see in the announcement trailer for this game, which I'm very excited about witnessing for myself. Now, one of the ways you can actually capture this fort is to scale the walls. You can use ladders to position around the fort, and you can get up onto the walls, and then you can go in hand to hand or with your musket fire or swords. Now, ladders of course are a decent way of getting up with infantry onto the walls, but the problem with them is they can be very, very dangerous. It can make you very vulnerable, especially in the climbing phase, where you cannot attack nor really defend against oncoming musket fire or bayonets. So ladders will be a good way of trying to charge quick fire infantry up onto the wall, but it may have some issues with regards to the vulnerability of the infantry you're sending up. So you're going to have to use strategy to maybe give covering fire or use these ladders in strategical moments of time. Now another way you can actually get onto the wall is through destroying them. Now this is such a cool thing. I love games that put in destructible terrain, and it really just adds to the game because it changes the maps. Many games just have set maps that you play and you get bored because it's the same thing over and over again, but having destructible terrain leaves dynamic forging of these worlds and maps that the players can actually do, so it keeps them interesting and it makes it so you can have different ways of actually gaining the strategical advantage, especially in a siege where you have to take this fort and maybe first time you try go through the front, you try and break through the wall at the front, maybe it doesn't work, then you try and shoot up behind, you try and get some men up behind with breaching through the wall, and it really just opens up this offering of different strategical advantages you can actually do with this destructible terrain. Now, of course, the main way you're going to be doing this as an attacker is through the ship's guns. You're going to have to try and batter down the walls, and of course some places may take more battering than others, depending on how thick this part of the wall is. Now, of course, you can also use these cannonballs and this ammunition to change the terrain, not just breaking down the wall, but even breaking the defenders' cover. So let's say they're hiding behind some part of the wall that is mostly used as cover. You can batter that down, so you're actually making the defenders more vulnerable, and also you're also covering your infantry because maybe they can't actually get up onto the wall yet. Maybe you haven't made a full breach to get up to the wall, but if you're breaking down the defenders' defenses, that means that they're going to be more vulnerable and less inclined to shoot down at your friendly troops. Now, of course, you don't just have to destroy the fort's walls, and you don't just have to kill the enemies defending it. Of course, the people defending it will be firing back. As we've seen in the trailer, there are cannonballs hitting the water everywhere, firing at these landing crafts, which means that there will be actually artillery on the forts themselves. They'll be firing back at the attackers and trying to stop them coming up the beaches and landing onto their coast. Now, there is a really cool feature that has been added in that is actually in this developer blog, which shows that you can actually destroy the fort's cannons. Damaging and destroying the fort's cannons by hitting them with artillery aboard your ships will render the guns unusable. This is really good for stopping the defense and basically aiding your attackers and giving them a better chance of getting up to the walls without being taken out by massive lead balls. Many of these features we have actually seen in games such as Mount & Blade Warband Napoleonic Wars expansion, and yes, you can knock down walls in that, you can breach the walls, you have ladders, and you can actually get ships in it now. But Holdfast Nations at War adds its own thing, it adds its own twist to the game, which actually adds a really nice dynamic to these coastal sieges, and this is called the shipyard. Now, this is more of an FOB, which is a forward operations base, which means that you will actually be able to take this place called the shipyard. Now, I'm going to read what it says on the blog post to explain it a bit better for you guys. So the shipyard is a secondary and optional objective for the attackers, and they need to capture this shipyard. But of course it is a sub-objective to the main fort. But this is a strategic point that allows the players to spawn near it in limited numbers. So when using the shipyard as a forward point, you will not have to make use of the landing boats and of course the main boats. You won't have to spawn out there every single time. But it is relatively close to the fort's entrance, so that does mean that you will actually be able to get there quicker, but of course it will be a very vulnerable spawn. So all in all, the shipyard is a secondary objective that attackers can capture, but it does say that they'll be able to spawn there in limited numbers. So of course you won't be able to just swarm it with all your men as soon as you capture it. Maybe you'll have a few strategical people spawning there, getting up close, bringing the waves, keeping the pressure on for the enemy. But this is a really nice feature that has been added, which means that you won't have to land every single time. Once you've captured this point, it adds a sense of progression. Now, of course, in these forts, we don't just have the walls that you can break down, you have the gates. Now, every fort has a gate, but how are you going to be able to take these out? Now, it does say on the blog that two-handed axes are especially useful at breaking gates. Now, we do see this where you can actually just be battering down the gates where you have cannonballs firing, at the walls. But it does say in this map specifically that there is a drawbridge. So will the attackers have to maybe find somehow to get the drawbridge down? Will they have to damage it enough where they can get across? I don't know. That's going to be a really interesting dynamic. So the gate may be a bit weaker than the walls, especially because you can batter down the gate with axes. You cannot do that to a stone wall. But is it going to be harder to get to? I presume that it is going to be. But once again, having all these different options and ways of getting into the fort just adds to the dynamics of the game and keeps the players interested, using new strategies in order to win the day. Now, of course, the defender's objective is to keep the attackers at bay. I presume there's going to be some sort of time limit, so they have to try and keep the attackers back and basically defend their fort. Now, of course, the fort does give them this strategical advantage, but they do say that the reinforcements are limited, so the defenders will not have unlimited lives. I suspect the attackers might if they keep getting reinforcements coming forward, but because the defenders are stuck in their fort, because they are somewhat surrounded, you're going to have to be very strategical about saving your life, really. You can't just charge in there, especially because you do have limited respawns. So reinforcements are going to be something where the players defending the fort have to really watch out for. Now, swivel guns are actually placed around the inside of the fort, along with the big cannons, of course, for shooting at long range. These swivel cannons are very good for maybe shooting at the small landing craft, but especially good for shooting on coming infantry. If you can load them with canister shots, you can take up 5-10 men out at the same time with shrapnel going everywhere. This is really good for defending choke points in the fort, and it's going to add for some really good strategy, not just from the defenders, but from the attackers as well, because they need to pinpoint these swivel cannons and they need to decide, are we going to attack there? Is it worth the loss of life that we may have, or will they have to take out these swivel cannons to start with, because I suspect they'll be easily destroyed just as the cannons on the main bit of the wall. So all in all, this is actually going to have to use a lot of strategy in not just attacking but defending. Will you wait until the walls have been breached, or will you go for a frontal assault as the attackers? Are you going to risk it and scale the walls with the ladders, but it's very vulnerable to your infantry? Or will you control the shipyard at first and then you will wait so you can get your reinforcements up and go for a massive charging? And as the defenders, what is your main priority? Are you going to be shooting at the landing craft, the infantry, or maybe even the engineers coming forth? All this is very interesting, and I'd love to see what your thoughts about this new information that we have been told in the comments. But other than that, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video on the coastal sieges in Holdfast Nations at War. This game is keeping us so informed about how the development is going, and I love the developers for that. I'd love to see your thoughts on this new information we've seen. For me, it's just making me so excited for this game, and I'd love to see some more footage at some point about how they're going to do this, and maybe even some gameplay that we might see in the future. But other than that, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like it if you did. You know what to do if you didn't. But subscribe to the channel for more content on Holdfast, Nations at War, and other games of the like. But until then, I will see you in the next one.